Thanks, Bill. Indeed, time and making everything in time is key. And that's why we have 12 hours per day agenda in this world's ever biggest WebEx Global Impact Week to bring everyone so we can make things on time. Bill McKibben, ladies and gentlemen, we continue now with a special panel discussion on nature loss as a main challenge and opportunity to achieve sustainability and well-being. And who else can be moderating this but our friend Angela Antetomaso, correspondent of Forbes, live from New York. Angela.
Hello and welcome everyone. I'm very happy to have you here today for this Wellbeing Global Impact Week. I'm Angela Antetomaso from New York, correspondent of Forbes, and I have three wonderful guests with me today to talk about nature loss as a main challenge and opportunity to achieve sustainability and well-being. So let's welcome our guest today, Andreas Beckmann, Regional CEO at WWF Central and Eastern Europe. Welcome, Andreas. Lovely to have you here.
Welcome. Thank you. Glad to be here.
Enric Sala, Explorer in Residence at National Geographic Society. Welcome, Enric. Lovely to see you.
Hi, Angela.
And Justin Winters, co-founder and executive director at One Earth. Justin, welcome. So nice to have you here today.
Thanks so much.
So as I said, we have wonderful guests and actually wonderful bios. I will just give you a quick overlook. So Andreas Beckmann, Regional CEO of WWF Central and Eastern Europe, responsible for leading the efforts of WWF to ensure a living planet for nature and people in Central and Southeastern Europe and to preserve the green heart of Europe, including forests, wetlands, and wildlife. Before starting working at WWF in 2001, Andreas spent 10 years living and working in Prague for the Environmental Partnership, and he serves on the board of a number of organizations, international organizations. And he lives in Vienna at the moment. He has got an MBA from the University of Bradford, MA Stanford University, BA was Swarthmore College, and so many other things, to be honest. And I just wanted to leave room also to present the other guest, which is Enric Sala, Explorer in Residence at National Geographic Society. He is a former university professor who quit academia to become a full-time conservationist as a National Geographic Explorer in Residence. He founded and leads Pristine Seas, a project that combines exploration, research, and media to inspire country leaders to protect the last wild places in the ocean. He has funded Pristine Seas, has helped to create 24 of the largest marine reserves on the planet, covering an area of 6.5 million square kilometers. He has won many awards, among these 2008 World Economic Forum's Young Global Leader and Explorers Club Lowell Thomas Award in 2013. And now I would like to introduce Justin Winters, co-founder and executive director at One Earth. Justin is committed to climate philanthropy in order to address the climate crisis from the ground up. To One Earth, she's focused on creating a vision for the world that is possible by 2050, in which humanity and nature coexist and thrive together. The vision is based on three pillars of action: 100% renewable energy, restoration of 50% of the world's lands and oceans, and a transition to carbon negative agriculture. So many things to say about our wonderful guests today, and I would like to get straight into the questions. I would like to start with Andreas. Andreas, as I say, at WWF, climate change is a global challenge that affects all of us on planet Earth. What is the interconnection between climate change and natural loss, according to you, and how can we raise consciousness about this big issue?
Mm-hmm. So I think climate change and biodiversity loss are interconnected. And I think it's important to take into account the fact that these are the defining challenges that are facing us, our civilization today. The ongoing pandemic, the COVID pandemic, which is actually keeping me in my home right now, sooner or later it will end. But climate change and biodiversity loss will continue, and they will determine all aspects of our existence, our lives, our health, our societies, our economies, our well-being. And the two are intimately connected. Climate change is driven by nature loss, and vice versa, nature loss is driven by climate change. If I can give a few examples, Forests, as people are well aware, serve as carbon sinks. They suck up carbon and store the carbon. And when we cut them down, this releases, of course, the carbon, contributing to climate change, as is happening in the Amazon. About 25% of greenhouse gas emissions come from the land sector, including deforestation. At the same time, climate change is a key driver of nature loss. Another example, coral reefs, which are very important for the well-being, for the food of many people, as well as for nature, as the nurseries for fish. Climate change is driving bleaching of corals, the loss of corals. Over the last 40 years or so, we've lost about 30 to 50% of coral reefs on this planet. And scientists tell us that we could very well lose many more of those in the next decades. So we can't address climate change without addressing deforestation, like in the Amazon. We can't address the biodiversity loss without addressing climate change, as in the case of the coral reefs. So the two are intimately connected.
That's absolutely true, and we are here to discuss this also with the other guests, because again, this is something that really touches us all and our planet. So it's absolutely key that we can reach all of these by 2030. I mean, at least a first step towards carbon neutral by 2030. But I also wanted to ask Enric, everyone is dreaming to work as an explorer at Nat Geo, and you are actually doing that. So can you tell us more about your experience and what are the most important lessons you learned from wild nature?
Well, I'm exploring residence because I was frustrated by being an academic. When I was a professor, I was conducting research and publishing about the continuous death of ocean life, right? I felt like the doctor who's telling you how you're going to die with excruciating detail, with more and more data, but not offering a cure. So I quit, and for the last 12 years, I've been working to help to protect key places around the ocean, working with wonderful partners like Justin, with whom I've worked for many years. And we have worked with local communities, indigenous peoples, and governments to create now 25 of the largest marine reserves on the planet. On Monday, I was in Madeira in Portugal, where the regional president announced the creation of the largest no-take marine reserve in European waters in the North Atlantic. And what we have learned is that nature has this amazing capacity to bounce back, because in this marine reserve where there is no fishing, no drilling, no mining, the abundance of fish, the abundance of marine life increases spectacularly. I have seen it with my own eyes. I've seen places that were degraded now be pristine. And one more thing I'd like to mention, since Andreas mentioned coral bleaching. We just came back from an expedition to the Southern Line Islands in Kiribati, the most pristine coral reef archipelago on the planet, where the first time we went there in 2009, the bottom was covered by live, thriving coral. The abundance of fish was off the charts. You jump in the water, and you are immediately surrounded by sharks and so many large fish like nowhere else in any coral reef in the world. But in 2016, there was a huge warming event that killed half of the corals in those reefs during a summer. But we went back last October, 5 years after the bleaching, and the reefs have completely recovered. We saw the fastest coral recovery ever measured in history. Why? Because these places are fully protected, because the abundance of fish is so high that the fish keep the reef clean and allow the corals to come back. This is why, another example of why nature not only has an incredible capacity to bounce back, but also it is biodiversity, it is the abundance of life that provides the resilience to global warming.
This is definitely very, very inspirational and just a message of hope, Enric. I mean, I'm so happy to hear that. I wanted to ask Justin Winters. Justin, you said that biodiversity loss and climate change are twin crises. Can you tell us about the roadmap that One Earth has created to solve those issues?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, it's been a very organic journey, actually. So I was leading and building Leonardo DiCaprio's foundation for 13 years and closely with Enric, actually. And we found ourselves asking questions. Is it possible to solve the climate crisis? What's the goal line? And at the heart of that, for us at least, was what is the role that nature plays in solving the climate crisis and really elevating that? Because historically, most of the focus, and rightly so, has been on the energy transition. But we were looking for scientific answers that really validated the role of nature in solving the climate crisis and building a very vibrant future for all of humanity. Many years ago, I think it was starting in 2016, we started funding science with a whole group of leading experts. And in 2019, the One Earth climate model came out. It was produced by two of the leading IPCC authors, leading climate experts. And that was a 500-page book. You can imagine how gnarly it was to really kind of break down a 500-page peer-reviewed piece of science into something that was understandable for mere mortals like myself and the general public. But the short story here is that it is possible for us to achieve this incredibly important goal of 1.5 degree C and limiting global temperature rise to that amount. And we can do it with existing solutions. And those three core solutions are that transition to 100% renewable energy, protecting and restoring nature at scale. And our research is showing 50% ultimately is the goal. We've got to get there, but 50% is the goal on land and sea. And then the final piece is really transitioning away from these extractive industrial forms of agriculture to regenerative agriculture. So, I think the highlight there is that it's possible. It's not some pipe dream. Most of the public and even folks that work deeply in the climate movement think that it's impossible for us to overcome this incredible crisis in front of us. And the truth is that we can actually solve it. And we have everything we need right now. And nature, biodiversity and our soils play a huge role in actually getting us to solve climate change and creating a future that I want my child to have, a vibrant, beautiful, healthy future with clean air, clean water, healthy food, and beautiful biodiversity.
Thank you, Justin. And as you said, and I didn't say before in your bio, but yes, Justin was part of the Leonardo DiCaprio Foundation for 13 years. And, you built the organization Grant Making Program, which awarded over 100 million in grants across 60 countries. So there is a really huge effort, on your side and on all of you today to try to give this message to our viewers and trying to understand exactly what we can do to really improve the situation on our planet. I would like to ask Andreas at this point. Andreas, what is the impact of natural loss, climate change on our economies, our health, our welfare, and well-being? What is your take on this?
It's a big question. Nature, of course, is essential for human existence, for the good quality of life. It provides and sustains air, freshwater soils, on which all of us depend. Also regulates the climate, provides pollination, pest control, reduces the impact of natural hazards. So there's a lot there. And of course, trying to put a price tag on that is difficult, if not impossible. Nevertheless, some economists have tried to do so. And one estimate is that the annual value of all of the goods and services that nature provides adds up to about $125 trillion. If you compare that, again, annually, if you compare that to the annual gross domestic product globally, which is I think right about $80 trillion, that gives you a sense of the value that we're talking about. First of all, the fact that value of the nature is not even included in that, which indicates how our current economic system does not fully account for all of the benefits and the services and the goods that we're getting from nature on the one hand, but at the same time also what's at stake if we lose that. Another way of looking at it is in terms of the costs of the annual cost of pressures that we're putting on our oceans, for example, in terms of pollution, our forests, rivers. That's been estimated at $300 billion, another very big number. At some point, in that those numbers certainly or almost certainly don't get to the full value, because it's really the integration, the fact that this is a web of life that we depend on that really makes the difference. When it comes down to it, our humans wealth depends on nature's health, you could say the same thing with our health as well. You can't do business on a dead planet. So it's absolutely fundamental.
Definitely so, Andreas. I totally agree with you, actually. But who won't? At this point, Enric, I would like to ask you, how can we achieve an inclusive path to net zero, and what is the role of nature for this?
Well, if you're asking about the inclusiveness, we need to make sure that everybody will benefit from a healthy planet. And today, the people who are suffering the most are the poorest, and the people mostly who have not created the big bulk of climate change. So to be able to have a path to net zero that includes everybody means that we need to do two things, like Justin has said before. One is to reduce our carbon emissions to almost zero, phase out fossil fuels and replace them with renewable energies. And for this, the countries of the North, the global North, the rich countries, have to finance that transition quickly for developing countries, because it would be totally unfair, inequitable, and unethical for the polluting countries to pretend that they can continue emitting and that it's the rest of the world has to compensate for that. So that's one. But reducing our emissions is not enough. We also need to suck up the excess carbon pollution that is in the air and the ocean, because talk about CO2, carbon dioxide. A molecule of carbon dioxide that we emit now can be in the atmosphere for 1,000 years. So if today we stopped all emissions, we still have too much carbon dioxide in the air that is going to continue warming the planet. Now, how are we going to suck up all this excess carbon pollution from the air? Some people think that we're going to invent these machines and that we're going to have markets, etc. It's not going to work. The only technology we have to extract that carbon from the air at scale is called trees, forests, wetlands, mangroves, peatlands, healthy ocean ecosystems. And like Justin said very clearly before, to be able to do this, we need half of the planet in its natural state. Unfortunately, today we don't have enough intact nature for nature to be able to absorb this excess carbon that we have expelled into the atmosphere. So this is why we need to get to half of the planet protected, and starting by protecting at least 30% of the planet by 2030 and restoring a big chunk of our degraded lands and oceans.
Thank you, Enric. And this obviously leads me to another question that I would like to ask Justin in this case. Justin, how can we protect nature at scale? At the recent COP26, we heard a lot about the role of indigenous people in protecting biodiversity. Can you tell us more about their role and about all of this?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're kind of at a moment where we're redefining the understanding of what conservation means. There's a whole realm of types of effective conservation measures. And one of the ones that really needs to be scaled up and supported is indigenous land tenure rights. So when we ran our study, the Global Safety Net, which found that we needed to protect and restore 50% of the world's lands, we didn't get to oceans yet. You can imagine what a big piece that is. We're relying on Enric to carry that ball forward. But what we found is that at least 1/3, at least, and I think that this is actually a low number, 1/3 of the lands that the Global Safety Net shows us that we need to protect and restore are in fact indigenous lands. So that means that we have a network of indigenous peoples that have been undermined for centuries, that really need to be supported. Their land tenure rights need to be recognized, and they need to be resourced to adequately protect and restore their lands. So it's a, I think that this is a measure that is hard for people that don't work in this space to fully understand, because they are a relatively, until now, I think, unseen network of change makers around the world that really should be empowered to lead the way in conservation. And one of the things, I mean, just to tease this out a little bit more, one of the honors that I've had of doing this work globally with so many partners is having access to and building relationships with and witnessing and supporting this network of people. It's both indigenous peoples, it's local communities, it's grassroots movements, and all of that is often, in some cases in partnership with some of these larger organizations like WWF and others. But there is a really vast network of people that need to be empowered and scaled with resources and support to reach these goals for the protection and restoration of nature.
Thank you, Justin. And
can I build on that, Angela? Yeah,
yes.
no, I think it's. We've been talking about big numbers here. Half the planet, and I think it's really important to understand that people understand, the true scope of what we're facing. Just the fact that we are facing right now a crisis, like I said, of a planetary proportions. In the last time we faced such an extinction rate that we're currently experiencing was when the dinosaurs disappeared from the face of the earth. Every couple of years, WWF puts out a health check for the planet. It's called a Living Planet Report. And the last one that came out last year found that in the last 50 years we've lost 68% of the wildlife on this planet. More than 2/3 of the wildlife on this planet wiped off just in my own lifetime. And I think people, maybe people are beginning to realize that, maybe the scope of that, but I don't think they have quite grasped yet what that actually means for us, the actual full ramifications of that. It's not just, you're losing a tiger or something, you might care, you might not care. It's actually at the point that we're actually snipping away at the web of life on which we all depend, that provides the basis for our economy, the basis for our health, the basis for our well-being. So I think it's really important to frame it in those really major terms and to really understand the true crisis that we're facing.
This is quite scary and worrying because, as you say, probably, not many people have a real grasp of what's happening out there at the moment. We talk a lot about it and we hear a lot about it, but what is really happening, we don't see because we don't touch it. You are, the three of you are actually probably best people to discuss something like that and tell us more. So please, we have another 25 minutes. Just tell us exactly what is going on out there and what can be done, because it's so important for everyone to really know. Enric, a question for you. Actually wanted to ask you, what should be done on both an individual and collective level in order to address these challenges and obviously to try to overcome them?
Well, the problem is that there is no silver bullet, right? Everybody wants to hear something that is easy to do. Tell me what to do and I'll do it. Well, it's so many things. And unfortunately, we got to a point where the crisis is so huge that we need to do everything that we can. We need to protect the places that are still intact. We need to secure indigenous land rights. We need to eat less meat, actually, because especially the global north doesn't need so much meat to obtain all the proteins and the nutrients. So we need to change the way we produce food so we can have more land used more effectively, which means giving it back to nature. So nature can give us many more benefits than just meat. We need to cut carbon emissions. We need to do all these things. One thing we see, though, is that companies, especially oil companies, throw the blame to the public, right? Calling them consumers. Citizens are called consumers. And here is a way to estimate your carbon footprint. And you should, these are all the ways that you can do to reduce your carbon footprint. We're not going to get there, right? If everybody is supposed to do the right thing. What we need at this point to be able to achieve the change we need at the scale we need to avoid a global humanitarian disaster is for governments to get very serious about regulation, right? We saw the COP26 in Glasgow, the climate COP, where at the end of the last minute, basically India and China said, "Oh well, we don't want to agree to get rid of coal." Well, coal is the single worst thing that we can do to the planet and to ourselves. So if we cannot agree on getting rid of the worst poison for the future of the planet, how are we going to get there? You can have as many people demonstrating on the streets as you can, But unless there is that clear political mandate at the global level, we are not going to get there. And to get clear political mandate at the global level, we need national mandates. We need governments to regulate carbon emissions, ideally to set a carbon tax. So then industry, every company will say, oh, I'm not going to be the first mover. I'm not going to be the one who's going to suffer. It is a level playing field. And now we'll innovate and we'll move things much faster, right? So there is not a single thing that can be done. We need all of it. But what I do myself personally is work, dedicate my full life to create many more of these protected areas where marine life can recover. They can also help absorb more carbon, avoid carbon emissions, help to replenish the areas around so there is more food for the future. But also, I have shifted my diet and I eat mostly plants, which is good for my health, but also it's good for the planet.
And just to add to that, I mean, on the same, and Enric is absolutely right that there is no silver bullet, that we need lots and lots of different solutions to address climate change, to decarbonize, but also to create a planet, a nature positive future. Absolutely right in terms of the government action that needs to happen, but also companies, the business sector. WF, together with a number of other organizations, set up what's called the Science-Based Targets Initiative that helps companies, and there's now more than, I think, almost 2,000 companies that have now, including the largest companies, that are now setting these science-based targets of how to cut their emissions. And in future, as well, the next thing that we need to develop is to also take into account biodiversity. That gives a framework and understanding for the companies and targets for them to actually come down to zero. So that's the kind of thing that also needs to happen of individual companies, but then also similar initiatives for communities, for regions, all the way down to individuals, as Enric mentioned, in terms of his own personal lifestyles. And we can get into that later on, but I'll stop now.
No, thank you, Andreas. It's very important. But yes, Justin, I saw you nodding. So please, if you want to add something, elaborate, please do.
I mean, it's a complex scenario, right? Because as Andreas mentioned, there's 1,000,001 solutions that need to be happening simultaneously. And I obviously completely agree with what Enric said about governance needing to get serious about the targets that they need to reach, because there are limits to how far we can go. And we're at them right now. Something that we're kind of working to address at One Earth and comes out of this experience that I've had is that you can very easily, when you start talking about the radical change that governments need to make and corporations need to make, it can start to be very disempowering for the individual. It starts to feel like all of the change needs to happen at the top. And given how complex politics are and governments are, it can start to feel very disempowering, like, oh, well, all of the change needs to come from the top. And so therefore my actions as an individual don't matter. And it's actually the opposite of that. And at One Earth, we're working really hard to kind of create a sense of collective action and hope. There's, part of what we're grappling with here is a global sense of individualism, that everything is about one individual making it, getting big, making tons of money, being successful. We have to reframe and re-understand how we're connected to the earth and to each other and community. And once we start doing that, we start to kind of embody a different kind of power, which is called collective power. And that if you have a sense of the millions of other people around the world who are taking action on these issues and committing to change in their local communities, you start to feel a sense of collective power and then hope. So in order to kind of infuse that sense and to give people a sense of how powerful we are as a collective when we commit to making change, we've built two things, which I'd love for people to check out. We built the project marketplace on our website. And so this is a global marketplace of on the ground climate solutions led by nonprofits and frontline communities. that are implementing the changes that I laid out before, the 3 kind of core pillars of action that need to happen. So these are efforts that everybody around the world can support, whether they're a high net worth individual or an individual citizen who wants to commit $25 to one project in their local bioregion. So these are efforts to make that transition to 100% renewable energy. These are local efforts to protect and restore nature on land and sea. These are efforts to support farmers in a transition to regenerative agriculture. Less than 2% of all philanthropic capital goes to climate and environment, which is absolutely insane when you think about it. When you think about the crisis that we're facing, less than 2% of our charitable donations go to climate and environment. That's a paradigm that I will not stop committing to changing. Because I know that when we radically scale up the resources to the network of groups doing this work around the world, we can affect change in a really massive, powerful way. So I would invite everybody to explore that project marketplace. You can directly commit resources to projects. 100% goes to those efforts on the ground. Another piece, and eventually these threads that we're working on will come together at One Earth, but we also spent 2.5 years working with a network of experts to create a new biogeographical framework called Bioregions 2020. And essentially this is a roadmap of the world that is built by nature. And we need to re-understand the planet, not by political boundaries that are the lines of our countries and our states, but actually by the lines of nature, these common communities of plants and animals that need to be respected and honored if we're going to actually live here in harmony with nature. So everybody can go on our website and visit the navigator, and it'll geolocate you into your bioregion, and you can explore the nature around you and get a sense of and a deeper understanding of the deep biodiversity in your bioregion, and then the projects that are on the ground that you can support to affect change to solve the climate crisis.
And that sounds like a powerful message and very, very interesting. So thank you, Jussi, for saying that. And I'm sure that also, Andreas and Enric, they are experiencing these things in their lives, and they're trying to do everything possible. But there is one question that I would like to ask all of you, if possible, here. We are still going through a pandemic. What's the link, what's the connection, you think, between nature and the pandemic? And also, the impact of all of this on nature, on the on our lives, on our immune system, on the way we have reacted and we suffer from this pandemic and what is going on in the world right now. Started almost 2 years ago. Did you imagine that something like this would happen? I mean, the 3 of you have a wonderful background and are connected to, again, wildlife and nature and everything, and what's going on on our planet. Is the pandemic a sign of things that are changing and are getting worse? Andreas,
jump on that? Yeah, okay. If I could just follow up on what Justin said, I think the individual action is super important, and I really like the focus on that, because people sometimes forget that they can take action not only in their own lives, on their own dinner plate, in their own consumption habits and so on, but it's not only that at the same time they are sending signals, economic signals, to businesses that have an impact, and also in terms of voting, for example, also sends signals to governments. So it's not just the action that you're taking yourself, but the broader implications of that actions, also with regard to other people around you. They see you, what you're eating, and so on and so forth. So that really provides that kind of agency that everybody has. Onto the question of COVID pandemics and the state of the planet. Yes, human and planetary health are closely connected. There is a direct correlation between the loss of nature and the rise of pandemics. WF last year came out with a report specifically on this, well timed, unfortunately, that the coronavirus follows a number of diseases that we have that have emerged in recent decades. Think of Ebola, think of swine flu, AIDS, SARS, avian influenza, and all of these are zoonotic diseases. That means they have come from animals and jumped to humans. And there's increasing evidence that humanity's overexploitation of nature is one of the factors behind the increasing prevalence of these diseases. There's been a huge change in land use that has happened because about 3/4 of the land has been altered by humans. And with this is bringing humans into closer contact, not only with each other, which is an issue, of course, but also with livestock and also increasingly with wild animals. One of the issues related to that is the increasing the problem of illegal and uncontrolled trade in wild animals, increasing contacts with humans. So it's no surprise that the COVID, the coronavirus, seems to have developed in a market in Wuhan, similar as other of these zoonotic diseases as well. So there's a direct connection, and we can expect more of the same coming in future.
Thank you, Andreas. Enric, can I ask you what your take on this is?
Yeah, Andreas said it all. I mean, it's a destruction of nature, is our trading with wildlife that is putting these viruses in contact with people. And thanks to our global lifestyle, they spread like wildfire. And epidemiologists knew about that. Even Bill Gates gave a TED talk a few years ago saying that the next pandemic is going to be transmitted from people to people through the air. And we are lucky that we didn't have another virus coming in at the same time, because it could have well happened, because China continues selling and eating in other countries, but especially China, eating and trading with wild animals. So we're very lucky that we only had one acute respiratory syndrome virus at the same time. And we're going to have more if we continue to getting into pristine areas, if we continue to trading with wild animals, if we continue doing all this illegal mining and forestry. This is why it's so important to protect everything that is still intact. We should not cut a single more old tree. We should restore forest, allowing forests to restore themselves. And same thing happens in the ocean. There are viruses that come in the ocean, from the ocean. And in some coastal areas, people suffer from cholera because there is a bacteria that lives in seawater that is more prevalent because humans have removed the natural filter of the water, like giant clams or mussels or oyster reefs. So we're going to see more and more of this unless we protect more of nature. So it's not just a double crisis, climate and nature, it's also human health, right? So protection of nature is absolutely essential to solve the climate crisis and to ensure that we are not going to have or reduce the risk of future pandemics.
Sure. Thank you, Enric. And Justin, I think you agree with all of this. You want to add something about the connection between, health and wildlife and nature and this pandemic we are going through?
I mean, I think that Andreas and Enric covered everything. The only thing that I would add to it is that, it's surprising that we didn't have this happen sooner. It's kind of remarkable, actually, when you look back. I'm astounded that we held off for this long. Not that we didn't have smaller cases of this, but to this extent. But to me, I think it's as painful and as devastating as it's been to so many communities and so many people and so many families. It is a warning for us, and it's a moment for us to reconsider how we live here and how we live with each other. And you can also see that it's given people a sense of, it's given them reason to pause and reconsider how they want to be living and how things could be different. And that's, if we could take a really devastating situation and turn it into a moment, an opportunity to envision a different way of living here that is beneficial to all people and vibrant and healthy and filled with joy, then I hope that we can take this moment to envision that, because it is possible. Humans are incredibly creative, brilliant, and can be wonderful. And so this is an opportunity for us to redesign how we live here, and in ways that are not just healthier physically, but also about mental health. I mean, I think people have around the world are struggling with very oppressive systems that we've been living with for a long time. And there's an opportunity now to transform those systems. It can seem big and scary, but from my perspective, I think it's the sliver, it's a window of opportunity to redesign how we live here.
Yes, Angela, may I add to what Justin said? You know,
Please.
and not only prevention is a no-brainer, but it's also actually much cheaper than having to respond to a pandemic. The cost of the pandemic is probably what, $15 trillion, right? Globally, 15 trillion. Okay, how much would it cost to protect, to start with a third of the planet? Well, we published some research that estimates about 140 billion per year would cost to manage a network of protected areas on land and sea, including indigenous areas, covering 30% of the planet. But also the benefits would outweigh the cost, because for every dollar that governments invest in protected areas, those generate between $5 and $10 in economic output. And that's an underestimate, right? So wow. So actually the global economic output would be much greater if we had 30% of the planet protected. Now, how much does it cost? What's the value of the wildlife trade globally, right? $25 billion. So basically preventing, banning wildlife trade and protecting 30% of the planet by 2030 would cost a tenth of the cost of this pandemic in a space of 2 years, right? So from an economic perspective, it makes no sense to not invest in the prevention of another pandemic and in the most effective solution we have, together with reducing emissions, to combat the climate crisis.
And
this
jump
is
on
such
that.
a crucial point. And yes, Andreas, do you wanted to add something? Please.
Yeah, just a minute, because I think that we're coming to an end, and I think it's really important to end on a positive note. And I think there's a lot of really positive notes, what Justin said about the opportunity that this current crisis that we have gives us to take a step back and reconsider. And I see that in many different ways through my work. Going back to what Enric said about the wonder of nature, just the ability of nature to bounce back, this incredible energy and possibilities it has. But I think also just the fact that this is such an awesome crisis it gets very easy to get to feel overwhelmed. At the same time, you can look at it from the other perspective and say, this is an incredible, it's an opportunity. Every challenge needs a solution or calls for a solution, and every solution is potentially a business opportunity. So from a if you're an entrepreneur, if you are an innovator, this is your time. We've never needed so many solutions that we do today, be it on a societal level, so the kinds of work that all of us are doing, but to individual products, services, and so on, we need to rethink everything. And that, if you look at it from that perspective, it is super exciting. Never before have we had such an opportunity, really.
Exactly. So, these beautiful messages of hope and opportunity, let's put them to good use. Now, we do have just a few minutes left. I just wanted to ask all of you what your vision for the next few years or decades is. Justin, can you start? Would you like to start, please?
You're putting me in the hot seat. I feel like I'm being repetitive, but, I really do see this massive opportunity in the next 5 to 10 years for us to redesign how we live here. And when I say that, I don't mean just kind of vaguely on a global level. I mean, it really is about doing it locally in your bioregion, and understanding the nature around you, taking a moment to learn, to understand, to experience nature, to experience the sounds of nature, to go outside, to reconnect to it. And then to do something with your community about it. It's finding a project in your local community that is realizing one of those 3 pillars of action, and volunteering or giving it resources to grow. Those 2 things alone, I think, if we do that collectively together, can actually affect great change. And of course, you've got to keep your eye on the mark in holding governments accountable, both locally and globally. But I think we need to do both at the same time. because it creates a sense of collective power, like I mentioned before. A different future is possible. We can actually create a planet and a future where all people live together in harmony with nature. And that is ultimately where we need to head. And I refuse to accept the future of us all living on Mars, because I love this planet. This planet's diversity, both culturally and with biodiversity, is astoundingly beautiful. And I'm committed to protecting it. And I think that if we all do that, there's no doubt that we can actually achieve that goal.
Well said. We need a new deal for nature.
Message of hope. And yes, I wanted to also ask you, Andreas and Enric, for your vision. We have just a few seconds left, but yes, please give me your message of hope.
A new deal for nature and people. That's what we need, what Justin said.
And my vision is, my vision, I think Justin said it beautifully. I cannot add much more, but the vision is that we live in a planet where the ocean is regenerating instead of being emptied by us, where the air is getting cleaner, where the warming of the planet is slowing down, when nature is coming back and people are healthier and eat healthier local food. And yeah, we all live in harmony with nature.
That's great. So harmony with nature will be our password here. I just want to say thank you to all of you, my wonderful guests and all our viewers. Thank you so much for being with us for the Wellbeing Global Impact Week, for this wonderful panel, Nature Loss as a main challenge and opportunity to achieve sustainability and well-being. We got lots of interesting tips and messages. So I really hope that we can all, take it on board and make it ours and change this planet. I just wanted to thank you, our guest, Justin Winters, co-founder and executive director of One Earth, Enric Sala, explorer in residence at National Geographic Society, Andreas Beckmann, regional CEO at WWF Central and Eastern Europe. Thank you so much for being with us, and thank you all for, being here. And just please remember, we want to live in harmony with nature, the importance of planet Earth, and to do everyone, a big collective effort to make this planet Earth better. Thank you so much from me, Angela Antetomaso, correspondent of Forbes from New York, is all for this Wellbeing Global Impact Week. Bye.
Thank you, Angela.